This is another day. We are streaming the Nate Hates Boring People podcast. Today I have a very special guest, Nate from Zed. You know I love Zed. Been streaming Zed for since it got open sourced. Today I have a very special guest, and of course Twitter is being weird. I have to start my Twitter broadcast after I start the other broadcasts because Twitter is weird that way, which is very annoying. Of course, Twitter is being weird. I have to start my Twitter broadcast after I start. This. I feel so unprofessional. I apologize.
Your audience? Hopefully not to me, because I'm good.
Fantastic. I feel like I gotta apologize to someone. But we are live, and fantastic. There's a window with you, and then I have the chat window. So let's see. I already said hello, everyone.
Hello, everybody. I'll say hello.
All right, fantastic.
How do I know who's like watching this and stuff?
If you go to Twitch. I'll send it in the side chat
Okay.
here. Where's the side chat?
Oh yeah, where is anything? Discord.
I don't know how to use Discord.
I feel like such an old man every time I use Discord.
Oh no, don't worry. Everyone feels that way. It's awful. Shit.
There it is. Open chat. There, I see it. I see it in my little. It says stream, and then there's like an icon next to it.
There you go. There it is. And
Boom.
Yep.
What
you'll notice is not very many people will show up today because.
But well, then it'll be recorded, right?
Yes, there will be a recording
Yep.
live on YouTube, and that's generally what I send people because I cannot get people to agree on a time to come and watch the stream. Everyone says, "Oh, it's too late. Oh, it's too early. Oh, I'm in Timbuktu, so I can't see anything." Fantastic. Anyway, Nathan from Zed, how you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, it was a little frazzled. We were like in the middle of debugging our semantic index that's in progress being broken. And you know how it goes. Yeah. So I gave myself like a 6-minute buffer between frazzled debugging and chill interviewing, which probably was insufficient. I apologize, but I'll take a deep breath.
No, it's totally understandable. But yeah, so here on the Nate Hates Boring People podcast, we keep it pretty simple. I only have a couple of questions, and then based on your answers to those questions, I'll give more follow-ups. Just trying to figure out who you are, how you came to be, and how you got involved in such an interesting project and things of that nature. So the first question I always ask is, who are you? Just in your own words, who are you?
Wow, who am I? I'm definitely a software developer. I mean, I think that's a big part of my identity and a big part of why you're talking to me. I'm a father. I have 2 little girls. What else? I mean, I do yoga.
That's fun.
But yeah, who am I? Yeah, that's all the things I do. That's a tough question. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm obsessed with text editors, that's for sure, and have been for a long time. I've spent a lot of my life thinking about how text is represented, how it's edited, how you represent transformation of text, how you identify locations in it. There's sort of whole parts of my neural tissue that are sort of organized around those thoughts and ideas at this point.
So like if I were to ask you what your favorite text encoding was, it would be so basic that it wouldn't even be worth answering. I mean, obviously it's UTF-8, everyone's is, but it would be a question
Yeah.
that's like who cares? Yeah, obviously, duh. Because most people, you go up to them and you say, what's your favorite text encoding? They go, what? Most programmers, you ask them what their favorite text encoding is, and they're like, isn't everything ASCII? But you're like into the text stuff.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, though, I don't know that much about text encodings other than UTF-8, just
Amazing.
because I mean, back in the Atom days, it was UTF-16, unfortunately, because that's what JavaScript deals with,
Oh
and
yeah.
we touched that a tiny bit. Talking to language servers, they're all UTF-16, so we have to actually index UTF-16. Like basically, we have to index sort of in every Z buffer, like where is this in UTF-16 terms? uh,
That's funny.
but yeah, but I don't know. There are interesting other encodings like but yeah, like the Japanese ones.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know much about them, but I think they're interesting. Yeah,
All
but
right.
I don't know if
So,
that's the most fascinating answer to a question you've ever had
eh.
by any means. But yeah,
Let's see. The next question I always ask is, what do you do?
yeah, it kind of sounds like um, the same answer I gave to who I am. But yeah, what I do, I mean, lately what I do has become more varied because I was sort of so obsessed with creating the ultimate code editor and um, kind of doing things my own way that I ended up starting a company.
Hmm.
And so now I do a lot more like company like things like hiring people and interviewing people, um, and yeah, just raising money, talking to venture capitalists, running meetings, those types of things. But it's all sort of in service of, yeah, my ultimate desire to just build the ultimate code editor. And, I don't think I would want to run any other company, if that makes sense. Like, this is the one for me to run. I think some people, they're like entrepreneurs and they can maybe be plugged into a variety of different things. Um, but at least until this particular mission is like thoroughly accomplished, I couldn't imagine, yeah, doing anything else. So yeah, I work on code editors,
Interesting.
um, and do some yoga to keep myself sane in between. Um, yeah,
No, that's like a really good answer. I know it sounds silly, but like you're just singularly focused on code editors and then yoga to keep it so you can write more code editors, right? Keep yourself limber
yeah,
and ready to write code editors.
yeah. I mean, like I said, I have two daughters, so like, I have them maybe like a third of the time, and so that's a different like switch that flips, um, and that's a whole part of my life. But yeah, when the dad switch is not engaged, um, a lot of the energy moves toward either building this code editor or building the company that builds the code editor. One of the two.
Interesting. So then the third question we always ask is, what's your thing? What makes you unique? If you are unique.
It's the same answer to every single question for me. It's kind of funny. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that is probably the most unique thing about me is just um, what I've done in the software world.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So I kind of already answered that question, I feel like.
Absolutely.
What's my thing? Um,
No, this is
yeah, I mean, I do. I'm open to experiences, and I'm have some atypical things like that. Back there's a hyperbaric oxygen chamber that I go in. I try to go in every day. Um, I was talking to a former employer of mine who called to ask me about something, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I just took a nap in my hyperbaric chamber," and he's like, "Oh, that's not something you hear every day." um, so and I enjoy the occasional like psychedelic, you know, experience or yeah. So I'm open to. I like to dance. I like to push the envelope a little bit, but I don't think anything I do is really that remarkable. The most remarkable thing about me is probably Zed.
that's
Uh,
funny.
Yeah.
I think since I restarted this podcast, you might be the most like not straight laced person I've had on because everybody else is like psychedelics. What? It's great.
It's been a little bit, but yeah, I guess what I'm saying is like I'm down for whatever. It's kind of hot,
That's always like a good attitude to go through life with. You know, you get to see so many more things and experience so many more things, and you seem like you don't take yourself too seriously, which is a something I see a lot. You know.
Yeah, I try not to. Um, yeah, it's tough to like sort of take what I'm doing seriously without my taking myself seriously.
Yeah,
Um, and I think I'm more successful on some days than others,
that's
to be
funny. Yeah,
fair.
no,
Uh,
that's very good. So then the next thing I ask people come on the show, can you do me a favor and give me your entire story starting from conception, which I understand is a fairly conservative take. It's a non-political show, but starting from conception, what's your life story?
well, my parents met um, in San Diego, and I believe disco had a lot to do with my conception. So it probably has influenced my music taste, and that's because I have some disco chromosomes, probably. But yeah, my parents met disco dancing, um, which, contrary to popular understanding, is not just this, right? Uh,
Well, you got this
like,
one too.
yeah, it's not just that. Like, there's a whole world of disco that my parents, I think they do to this day. Like, if they go to a wedding or something, they'll bust out like New York Hustle. I sort of never got on board with that, the whole ballroom dancing, disco dancing world. But that was responsible for my conception. Um, okay, that's uh. So I grew up in like San Diego, inland, so not not close to the water, out by the tumbleweeds where the hills smell like juniper. Um, and I don't know what else. I mean, my dad was Jewish, my mom not. My mom's American. Um, and I grew up in sort of this neighborhood of San Diego, the city in San Diego County, Santee, that's kind of like, yeah. Uh, it was a weird world. It was kind of where the sprawl of the growing sprawl of surrounding San Diego collided with like Southern California rancher culture. And it was this weird sort of mixing of cultures, I think. I don't know. Is this more detail than you're interested in?
I
But
want to.
anyway,
I want you to give as much detail as you feel comfortable
okay.
with.
Um, but yeah, I mean, from an early age, I liked school. I liked learning, um, reading, learning, drawing, art. Um, and I think I had a hard time, like as a kid, early on. Like, uh, took a fair amount of abuse from my peers, I would say, which probably drove me further into kind of my imagination and my love of learning. Like that was a place where I got a lot of like positive reinforcement, um, or wasn't getting it from a lot of other places. Um, but then kind of by around, yeah, like fast forwarding, um, sort of around junior high, I remember this kid, Carlos Pereira. Uh, he was like a cool kid, and I was not. But then he decided to be nice to me, and as soon as he gave me like the green light, then I like was accepted amongst the cool kids. It was a very strange
It's like
experience.
a scene out of a
Um,
movie.
yeah, kind of, yeah. I'm very thankful to him, and yeah, that was like seventh, eighth grade. Uh, I was, I think, in response to a variety of different trauma, like the way that I dealt with that was just like um, eating way too much. So I was kind of a chubby kid, which didn't help anything. But by like into eighth grade, going into ninth grade, um, don't really know. There was this teacher that made a really big difference to me. My girlfriend and I um, went over to her house for dinner actually like a couple years ago, and I actually decided to give her um, a decent chunk of. I mean, relative to my total ownership, it's tiny, but um, it's competitive with like what an employee or something might have, like a more like a maybe not the principal engineer or whatever, but like it's a decent chunk of Zed
Mhm.
just because she made such a big impact on my life. I just think like for whatever reason, maybe like the engagement with her and just where I was at in my life, I kind of got it together. And in high school, sort of became like a normie in disguise, if that makes
I mean,
sense.
the nerd to normie
Like,
pipeline is a necessary one. I think that's always a good stage to go through. Some people stay a nerd forever, and that's a problem. You got to at least experience the normie lifestyle for a little bit.
yeah. And I think the high school I went to is like this West Hills in Santee. Um, was pretty welcoming to nerds or sort of normie. You could be a little nerdy and get by there. And yeah, so I don't know. I had a really good time in high school. Actually, I was on yearbook staff like all 4 years, um, and I ran track. So real up there with those extracurriculars.
Mhm.
But then what I wanted to do was do visual effects because I grew up watching like movie magic on the Discovery Channel. And they showed you all those like practical effects, and I was pretty interested in like computers from a young age. I guess I left that out of the story, but like my parents owned a printing shop, like offset printing. And so I was always around computers. Like they had a typesetter, which is like this, you know, computer attached to this massive device that would like etch type into film.
Oh, that's
Um,
really cool.
and then you would take that to a light table and like cut it apart with an X-Acto knife and lay out all the type that this machine had kind of lasered into the film for
Huh.
you. So it was around like graphics, uh, and sort of that was my entree, I think, into computing early on was like Corel Draw. I don't, it's sort of like an early Adobe Illustrator that ran on the PC because
Yeah.
we were like a PC family. Um, so I was interested in vector graphics, and I always kind of like was interested in programming, but I felt like I don't know. I had a friend, and her dad was like, "Oh yeah, you want to learn C++?" plus plus." So I
Oh
was like, "Okay,
no.
okay, I'll learn that." And I was like valiantly fighting through this, like it's like Sam's teach yourself C++ plus plus in 21 days, and like I think by day 21, I was probably through like chapter two and a half or something. Like that's not a good language to learn as your first language,
Yeah, I'm curious how many
especially
people are out
like
there who would have been perfectly good programmers who were told to start with C++ plus plus and just became plumbers instead. Like, what's the number? Probably
totally.
millions.
I know, yeah, because like I had all these aspirations of like building my own game or something, but instead I'm like just trying to make anything at all compile or anything happen um, in C++. plus plus. So yeah, it was kind of a rough introduction to programming, but the graphics world was really accessible to me. And being on yearbook, building layouts, like then later on we got access to Photoshop. But this was the days when you were like, remember zip drives? I don't know if you do. It was like this,
Just before my time, but I know what you're talking about.
yeah, proprietary, like, yeah, it's like I think it could store like 40 megs or something.
40
And you
whole
would like,
megs.
I know. uh, and yeah, you would like load up the zip drive and send it off to the publisher. Um, yeah, so that was my world. But I always had this idea of wanting to do visual effects, like I said, and so I decided I would go to the University of Southern California and do a double major in cinema and computer science. That was my plan. Um, and so I got a scholarship there, luckily, because I could it would have been very deeply in debt had I not. Um, and but honestly, it was like not the place for me. Like the entertainment industry, like while it seemed really glamorous and exciting on like the Discovery Channel, the reality of it, like I don't know. I remember visiting Digital Domain, um, and like watching the animators. Like I remember just watching this animator for like a while, just animating the expression of like Scooby Doo's
Mhm.
eyebrow, and I was just like, I don't think I want to do this actually. But what did really grab my interest was the computer science dimension of it. It took a while actually. Like it was pretty dry and pretty boring at first. But I think yeah, it was kind of like I discovered two things within a very short time frame of one another. Um, one was cannabis, and then the other was Lisp.
Yeah, no,
uh,
cannabis and Lisp are a necessary combination, I
totally.
think.
Um, yeah, I this was like pre Y Combinator. I found Paul Graham's book on Lisp, I think it was, in the school library, and he's such a good writer, and he
Oh
just
yeah.
got me so excited about macros and um, then I started dating this linguist, and she was learning about the lambda calculus as like a means of formalizing like the rules of grammar, and this totally different
Mhm.
window into it. And at the same time, I'm learning. At this point, I had found like the structure and interpretation of computer
Great
programs.
book.
Uh, but I found the lectures on YouTube with Abelson and Sussman that each one begins with this like cheesy MIDI song and like a wizard and this like really bad graphics. Um, and so I would just like cut class and hang out with her and get high and watch this structure and interpretation of computer programs videos, and then try to get Emacs configured properly to like do and do the examples. Just I don't know, but that's what really like this amalgamation of all these experiences really took the computer science from sort of like kind of dry, like I don't know, it just imbued it with like this magical
Mhm.
quality. From Java to this like Lisp world, and its tendrils back into like the 1980s AI culture with Emacs and all of that. I don't know, it's really like lit my curiosity on fire.
I really like
Um,
the Lisp stuff. I remember one of the books that I read in college that was one of my probably most important books I read was called A Gentle Introduction to Symbolic Programming. And I remember reading it, and there was a passage about recursion. And the way they explained recursion is they told this story about a little boy who met a dragon, and the dragon was dreaming, and in his dream, he went to sleep, and in that dream he went to sleep, and then it went so many layers deep, and then when the dragon woke up, they figured it out and explained tail curl recursion because the dragon woke up and finally had the answer to his problem. And it's just funny how the Lisp world is just filled with like all this like magical dragons and wizards, and it's so funny.
yeah, I think I don't know, I might have changed majors or something had I not encountered it at that point in time.
That's
Um,
funny.
but then, I encountered like I took the operating systems class, which was in C++, but was I don't know, still pretty cool and interesting. So as it got more into things, I got more and more excited. I started taking computational linguistics courses, and they were like graduate classes, but I would just take them. I don't remember how that worked out.
Mhm.
And I ended up working for one of my professors after I graduated. Um, I spent some time in Germany. That was cool. But then when I got back, yeah, I had this final comp ling class, and then so this guy, he was like the former uh, head of SRI. His name was Jerry Hobbs, and I still have a book that he lent me. I need to get it back to him. It's wild, like, um, but he, and his task for me was to like take this first order logic model of English grammar that he had created and like animate it, turn it into a program. Um, and so his but he's like, you have to write it in Java. He's like, I don't. I'm like, can I write it in Lisp? Because I was so excited about Lisp at the time. He's like, no. It's like, because if you write it in Lisp, it's just going to go the way of all these other research. Or I don't know. He had some bias against Lisp, which I think, like, I mean, he was in SRI in the 80s, which is probably like Lisp. It was the heyday of that tech. But yeah, I had to do it in Java. And, but I remember at the time, like, I read this blog called Lambda the Ultimate all the time, most of which like was a programming language theory blog, and most of it was way over my head, to be honest. But one paper I remember encountering and really, um, yeah, like uh, understanding and finding immediately applicable was about pack-rat parsing. Um, it's like a recursive descent parser that memoizes, and
Interesting.
I had done like Lex and Yak and stuff in my compilers class, um, but I needed a parser for Jerry Hobbs's like first order logic language, um, and I remember Lex and Yak just like because of the constraints around look ahead and ambiguity, etc. Like just being a little intimidating for me. Like at the time, all the rewrite rules and stuff that you had to do to like make it work. And whereas pack-rat parsing just felt immediately intuitive to me. And so I crafted this parser for it and um, or parser for the language using I think some Java framework that used pack-rat parsing. And I got it into my head right around that time, like, I want to make an editor. And I had this idea of making an editor that had like a really flexible, expressive parsing framework at its core. And the thought was like it'll be super hackable, like Emacs, but have the syntax trees always available. That was sort of the the idea, and I figured it would not take that long. And so I started learning like Objective C because I'm like I'll make a Mac editor. I had to learn Cocoa, um,
I'm sorry.
and
You
what?
had to learn
Yeah,
Cocoa, Objective C.
yeah, yeah. And I was still pretty green at that point, so like I quickly discovered like doing something even super basic was taking me like quite a while, and um, so I sort of put that idea on hold. Um, at some point, like I think yeah, Jerry's funding got cut and they put me on this other project, which was like maintaining some god awful Perl script for some crazy data pipeline, like early statistical machine learning stuff. And I just was not feeling it. And so I moved up to San Francisco to join this company. But I just was actually like not doing well. I think I was a year out of college at that point, living in Venice Beach. I wanted to move to Venice Beach because that's where Jim Morrison was from. I've always been a big fan of the Doors. And this actually segues into the psychedelic story, or yeah, because my sister sent me like all these shrooms, and I was not, yeah, I was just, I felt lost, like I had this idea of building the editor. Uh, and anyway, I ate way too many of these mushrooms, and sort of lost my mind. I won't go into too many of those details, but like it wasn't great. But in the aftermath of that, everything started to shift for me where I was like, I've been so busy like trying to sort of, I don't know, blaming myself for why I wasn't finding my place in Los Angeles at the time. And I finally realized, like, why don't I just go somewhere different? And I decided I had to go up to San Francisco. So loaded all my stuff into it. But yeah, I found this job on Craigslist, loaded all my stuff into a truck, and like moved into this room that was like, yeah, the size of a walk-in closet in the Noe Valley. Um,
What year was this?
this was 2006.
2006. So
Um,
this was like pretty good Silicon Valley years.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it was like the dot-com bust had happened, and it was a really good time. I feel like to move to San Francisco.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But the first job that I got was it was like this incubator. I don't know. The guy, I'm not going to name names, but yeah, like the guy that started the incubator had made a bunch of money in like the dot-com bubble. And he like walked into his office and it was just like articles with him and pictures of himself. Um
One of the commenters says, Ehrlich Bachman.
yeah.
Thank you, Irish
Is that like
Reyes.
yeah. Um and you know, like it was this, they were creating like a clone of Craigslist basically. They had no original ideas. And I was like, I've heard a lot of good things about like test driven development. Um,
Sorry, I'm still lost. A clone of Craigslist. That takes 8 minutes to make.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe not at the time. I don't know. But anyway, like I remember trying to make some refactoring or something to this code base, this Ruby on Rails code base that had no test coverage at all, and like breaking something in production. And I don't know, it scared the shit out of me. Like I'm this young kid, like uh I don't, yeah, like, it was just like, but I think maybe that same week, a friend of mine who had gone to Berkeley, um, I like hung out with him at the Ferry Building and met this guy Rob Me, who had started Pivotal Labs. At that point, I think it was just called Pivotal, um, and they were. I think he was there with like a bunch of old small talk guys and my friend, and I just got to talking to them, and they were talking about like extreme programming, agile, test driven development, the whole all this like stuff that had kind of heard about but didn't know anything about. And so I think like it was week two, I went in and quit. I went into the guy's office with the pictures of himself all over his walls. And I said, I'm quitting and joining this other thing. And he told me I was making the worst mistake of my life or something. It's just like, God, I would never do that to somebody. Like, if you don't want to work for me, good luck to you. I don't know. Like, what a rude. Anyway, but yeah, so I joined Pivotal, and that was like life changing. Pair programming every day. Getting. I think at first I would like ride the Muni, but after the Muni hosed me a few times by being late, um, I got a bike and um, yeah, just lived this sort of. I just was so happy, like just biking to Pivotal, pair programming all day. At some point, discovered yoga in the mix of all that, and that was like one of the best times of my life ever. Just learning so much about software from all these different people I was pairing with all day, um, and it was sort of at in that time that I started. getting excited about building the code editor again.
Hmm.
Am I going way too long, by the way? You asked from conception, but this is really long.
I
Yeah.
I mean, if this portion of the interview lasts the entire hour, I have no problem with that. You know.
Okay. Okay.
Otherwise, if you want to go longer than an hour, you could fill up the hour, and then we can keep going. If you're free and you want to,
All right. Yeah. We can go a little longer. Sure. Um,
fantastic.
so yeah. So I decided like at some point, you know, into that first year, I was like wanting to build the code editor again. I'm like, okay, I think I got to start on this again. And so what felt like the most natural place to start was a pack rat parser, like building the core of it. And so I remember at the time, I like didn't, I don't know why I did. I didn't have a laptop. I had a computer, um, but I don't remember why I would do this, or maybe I just liked the vibe of it. But I would go into Pivotal's offices on the weekends and just work on this pack rat parser. Um, and yeah, it was just like, I don't know, just so much fun. Like I just was lost in the problem, and it just felt like it kind of flowed out of me at that point. Like
Hmm.
I knew exactly. I mean, I was making a ton of mistakes that I didn't even know I was making, and building something that didn't perform as well as it needed to do, whatever. But it just felt like I had this confidence, and each step I would take just felt like natural, and like I couldn't wait to express it and get it out of my hands and my brain. Um, and so I think in at this point, like fast forward to maybe 2007, and yeah, the parser I ended up building was called Treetop, and a designer at Pivotal Arena helped me put together this web page for Treetop that was pretty cool at the time, and I went and gave a talk about Treetop at RubyConf in Portland, and um, I've been pair programming so much and was just like so immersed. Like all I did was just um, do yoga and work. Like I don't know, I had a very monk-like existence, but I was quite happy with it. Yeah, do yoga, work, and like bike around San Francisco and bike up to the headlands or whatever. Like it was very kind of well, when I wasn't like pair programming with people at Pivotal, it was very kind of solitary time.
I mean, you might be
Um,
the most Silicon Valley person I've ever interacted with in my life. You were reading Paul Graham before he was big. You went to you went to LA and then to the Bay. You're doing psychedelics. You learned Lisp, smoking weed. This is wild.
yeah, I didn't try to be that way, but I guess I just fell into the cliches. I just tripped right into them. Um, but so anyway, but at that talk, oh yeah, so anyway, one a big part of that talk was like a live coding section, and I feel like if I tried to give that talk now, I would not do as well as I did then. But I was just, I don't know, 9 to 6 with a 1 hour lunch break, 5 days a week, pair programming, um, was just like really sharp. And I did a pretty, I know people were impressed with the live coding part of it, and um, two of the people that were in the audience were Chris Wansroth and Tom Preston Werner, the founders of GitHub. And so, but anyway, fast, like nothing really happened right away from that. But, and I ended up trying to build this thing called Hyperarchy, which was like a uh, sort of, have you ever heard of liquid democracy?
No.
Um, well, anyway, I came up with this idea sort of independently of liquid democracy. But the idea was I wanted to build this like new model for democratic governance where you could sort of delegate on particular topics to individual people, rather than sort of electing like one representative for the entire land area or whatever. You would sort of, I would elect you to inform me about Twitch streaming, or so any vote about, I don't know, that's stupid, but like, pick a topic and you could sort of delegate your power to an individual and then they could
Mhm.
delegate it. And so the power would sort of like flow through this network graph was the idea.
That's
Um,
interesting. I like that idea. So if it's
yeah,
like
it's unclear,
LGBT
like,
rights, I give it to the Democrats. If it's, fiscal policy, I give it to the Republicans, and then it all filters out to
exactly.
the top guy for everything.
But it would be like, rather than giving it to the Republicans, it would be like, give it to your favorite particular
My
Republican.
boy
Like, could
Ron
be,
Paul. You don't need to have an opinion. It's okay.
yeah. But yeah, exactly. Like, or, it could be some influencer or even a friend, and maybe you give it to your friend and then they would give it to somebody. And they did, you could like switch your delegations around. And so there'd be this idea that like power would be like flowing, shifting all over the place. And so I don't know, like I was sort of put the editor dreams on pause for a little bit. And actually in 2010, um, decided, uh, yeah, my girlfriend and I at the time decided to like sell all of our stuff and put a few things in storage and just travel around the world for like a year. Um, and I was like working on this project. But the problem was is like instead of really working on the project, I just like spent the whole time either like when I wasn't like doing whatever crazy thing she wanted us to do, like walking on the Great Wall, or I just wanted to like be a nerd in code, and she wanted to just like see everything she could possibly see in the world. Um,
So what you're telling
and
is for the nerds out there, do not get a woman. She will stop you from reaching your full potential as a programmer.
I mean, if I could go back in time and like tell myself something, it's just like either like focus on your fucking project. Sorry, focus on your project, or
Oh, you're allowed to swear, by the way.
oh
Fuck,
great,
shit, piss, bitch, whatever. Go
okay,
ahead.
right. Um, or travel and do that thing, but like pick one.
Uh huh.
Because all it was sort of a recipe for conflict. Because like we're in Costa Rica or Argentina or all these crazy locations, and I'm like wanting to drill in and focus on making this thing happen, and she's wanting to go have fun and see things, and that was the conflict that proceeded throughout that relationship. Unfortunately, like
Oh, it's a
anyway,
shame.
but but all what I spent a lot of my time on was like building a freaking ORM, and it was really cool. It was
Mhm.
like you could compose these arbitrary relational algebraic primitives, and all these tricky problems of how to compile this down to SQL. Um, but like at the end of all of it, it's like I get back to San Francisco. My bank account is crossing zero. Um, like it's just clear that like I don't know, this whole idea that I'd had of like building this crazy democracy engine with no clear customer or plan to like have anybody use it, and then nerd snipe myself to death on implementing it in like the most complicated way. Yeah, I don't know. It was painful, sort of just like, oh, like reality kind of slapping me in the face, like, you're done now. You need to go get a job. Like, oh, I don't know. I had this vision of like saving up, and I would just launch this thing and it would magically happen. It's like, no, it was not happening. Um, and at some point, like, it was hard for me to accept because I kind of never really failed at anything before. I never tried anything that out of the ordinary, but everything I'd ever tried, like, always was successful. I always got straight A's. It was like the whatever you call it, and when you get the best grades in your college. And I was cutting class, like getting high, you know, watching skiing videos from the 80s. Like,
You were just hitting dingers
uh,
all day, Babe Ruth style.
yeah, yeah. And so I think that like lack of failure in a way sort of set me up for a really big failure. Just like
Mm.
not really thinking through what the hell I was doing with myself. Of like, okay, like who's your customer gonna be, or like what's the plan here?
This
And so,
reinforces the Silicon Valleyness of your story so much. This is like the story of
yeah,
like, Uber. Like, yeah, we just burned money until, oh shit.
yeah. Oh, they had a lot better plan than I had though at the time. But the one thing that kind of came back through as I was like coming to terms with my situation was, if I'm going to work on something, like it better be really complicated, hard technical problem to solve. Because if it isn't, I'll just make it that way. And like, so extreme technical complexity needs to be at the heart of whatever it is I'm doing. And the text editor idea that, had really been a big part of my earlier life before the siren of the hyperarchy, as I called it, this democracy engine,
Mhm.
drew me into the rocks, um, came flashing back, and I decided, okay, I know what I need to do. I'm building the code editor. Um, that was still kind of a ill-conceived idea, but my plan was I was gonna move to Boulder and I was gonna live in the hinterlands of Boulder and work like 6 months a year for Pivotal, and then work like 6 months a year on my open source code editor. Um, and luckily, like right before I left to execute that plan, um, a friend of mine, the same friend actually, yeah, Damon, who um, was like, "Oh, come to the Ferry Building where I met all the Pivotal people," and like, he was like, "Hey, you should see if GitHub might want to build your editor." And so I remember, like, I think the next day was GitHub's million user party, where it was like at Public Works in San Francisco, open bar party they were throwing, very early GitHub, probably fits right into the other, continuing to just plow straight through the Silicon Valley
Yeah, I was about to say, if you
stereotypes.
move out to Boulder, that's the full Silicon Valley guy stories. Moving to Boulder at the end.
Um, yeah, and right before moving to Boulder, I like found Chris in this bar and pitched him on this editor, and um, it turned out they had been working on an editor called Atomicity for a few weeks, I think, at that point, and um, they ended up hiring me on the basis of having seen that talk I gave on my parsing framework. Um, and yeah, there was really no other interview. It was like, yeah, there's there's no technical interview whatsoever. Uh, they just hired me, and kind of, it was me and Corey, Corey Johnson, and Chris is just like, okay, build an editor based on web technology, like go. And yeah, that was the beginning of my time at GitHub. And I don't know. Yeah, I feel like the rest of my story is probably better, or I've probably talked about more of it, in different interviews. I figured I would give you like the parts of it that
Mhm.
were less glamorous, or um, yeah, just like the earlier part of my, like before that. So in a way, like, I mean, I think I got that job at GitHub based on merit. Like I had put together that parsing framework and gave that great talk that they happened to see. Um, but I also just was totally lost in a lot of ways, and like had no, all I had was passion, of
Yeah.
like, I really want to build this code editor, and no clear path of like how to do that. And yet somehow like I was just so blessed to like just kind of stumble into the right situation where I could actually pursue that. Um, Thanks largely to Chris, because like it was never clear that Chris had any like idea of how Adam would make money. And I'm pretty sure like in the grand scheme of GitHub's story, like Adam was probably, net loss for them. Like all they ever did was pay people to work on it, and unclear, maybe there was some sort of halo effect that it was cool that they were working on it, but they didn't need it
Hmm.
by any means. Um, and but yeah, so I mean, I worked at GitHub for like 9 years, most of it on Atom. Um, and at some point, kind of decided like we needed to start over because we'd reached a dead end
Hmm.
with where Atom was for a variety of reasons. So we started over. There was sort of a weird power vacuum at GitHub at that point. It was like pre-Microsoft acquisition. Um, and no one had seen Chris in a while. Uh, and I was just like, I took it upon myself to start over, and we started over in Rust. Um, but then the acquisition went through, and the product managers descended and told us that what we were doing was not of interest.
The bean counters rolled
Um,
up and ruined all the fun.
kind of.
Isn't that how it always
I don't
is?
know. I mean, to some extent, like it made sense.
Mm.
And ultimately, they all did me a favor because, like, I would have built Zed for free for Microsoft, or I would have built Zed for like a salary at Microsoft.
Hmm.
Um, and I think I'm much happier just having figured it out myself. Like now we get to do exactly what now we're at the mercy of the market. Um, and that's going to be an interesting journey. I mean, I think there is plenty of money to be made if you actually own the editor. It's a huge opportunity. I think that's like not even being fully taken advantage of by Microsoft and with VS Code of like what can you really do with the front door to the entire software development experience. Um, but yeah, so I don't know. That was a tough time in my life of just like, okay, Adam's done. Even in my own heart, it was kind of done. And then the next step felt like wasn't really getting support. Um, and I was working on webhooks. I was really thankful to my manager Brooks Swinnerton, who sort of saved me from the jaws of death at GitHub actually, because I had a manager who I did not get along with, who was sort of angling to get me terminated, and he sort of rescued me, and I joined the webhooks team. But I was just so bored. Like, uh, I mean, GitHub had their webhooks were getting delivered by like a fleet of like hundreds of single-threaded Ruby processes,
Love to see it.
each consuming like 600, 700 megs of RAM, blocking
Beautiful.
on I/O, making outbound HTTP requests. Um, this poor team that I joined was
Oh
just like,
no.
um, and so like I spent my last year at GitHub like rewriting that all in Go, like to just like make a sane use of resources and stuff and make it reliable. But I was just really bored and really unhappy. And even, I'd been at GitHub long enough to the point where, the options that I had that were like still vesting or whatever were worth a ton. And yeah, that was actually like, yeah, golden handcuffs are, I mean, it's nice. It's like a very first world problem. Um, but it created a lot of conflict in my marriage, which wasn't then helped by COVID happening and just being all the stress of having young kids and COVID and
8 seconds there.
oh, maybe it was meant to be.
Yeah,
Um,
fair enough.
yeah, maybe I got too personal, but anyways, but it was during like the COVID, like Zed was like my happy place during COVID. Like it was the one place that I could go when I was like dealing with the 25th random edge case in GitHub's webhook delivery pipeline. Um, I just there's nothing I hate more than like dealing with highly critical legacy code that you know I just felt so like out of control and Zed was like a source of meaning. I felt like,
Certainly.
and it was a place that I could go where like I was in charge, and I don't know, and it kind of flashed me back to those early days of like going into Pivotal's offices on the weekends and working on my parsing framework of just like, this is my project, my baby. Antonio would work on it with me, but I think during COVID he was busy doing other stuff, and so it was just me. And yeah, but at the end of all that, like I was so desperate to do something different
Mhm.
because I was so bored at GitHub. And the one, yeah, the one, and to be honest, like I didn't know, I never thought of like raising money, starting I would think about it, but it was, I thought I would have to like go to Menlo Park, or like go to Sand Hill Road and have like a PowerPoint presentation or something. I don't know. I didn't know what. Um, and so this I got this cold email. I don't remember the subject line of the. I almost never, even to this day, I'm so bad about email. I hate email. Um, but somehow I saw this email. Somehow I opened it and answered it, and it was from the founder of Warp, the terminal.
Yeah.
And um, and for some reason, like my ex wife was, she was terrified at the idea of me starting my own company, which is like for understandable reasons, like seeing how other past attempts had gone, like the hyperarchy idea that kind of went nowhere. Um, but was more comfortable with me joining something else. And so I was like, well, this is not going to be a fight. And it isn't GitHub where I'm bored to tears. I'm going to just join this other startup. Um, and I was how long into it? Um, I think I hadn't even joined them yet. Um, and yeah, my wife asked me for a divorce. So then I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. Is this too personal? Anyway, it is what it
Oh,
is.
however personal you want to get.
Yeah, I mean, I told you I'm an open book. And at that point, I was just like, okay, I need something at this point to like give my life meaning. Um, because like, yeah.
Mhm.
And so I just said, fuck it. Like, I'm going to join this startup. Um, and yeah, uh, it was, and I licensed them all of Zed at the time. Like, because I was like, well, if we're going to build a terminal, like, we should probably use Rust. Like, I've been working on all of this tech that's applicable. Um, like, I'm not going to do this in Electron or something. Like, so we naturally like need to use this tech.
Yeah.
Um, and I moved out, pretty spooky feeling, like just being on my own for the first time. Um, and I don't know, the meaning that I felt like I had hoped that I would get out of joining the startup, like I don't know, it just didn't materialize, I guess. Like it and yeah, I was just faced with like, what do I want to do? But at that time, that was like early 2021, like the markets were absolutely going nuts on all the printed money. Um, and my stack of Bitcoin was like, up some absurd amount. Like I didn't ever buy enough, but I bought a very small amount like early on. And so it was up to a point where I'm like, okay, I can do my same old thing again. I can just like go work on software without any concrete plan, you know? And that's what I did. I told them I want to quit. Uh, and
Mhm.
my plan was basically to just work on Zed until I had something I could put on a slide deck on Sandhold Road or whatever. I just figure it out.
Mhm.
Um, but to my surprise, like there was interest, like almost immediately. Somebody I knew in Boulder, who's now become a pretty good friend, has a small uh, venture fund, very successful one. He was like the first check into Allbirds V1 VC, and he found out that I was like doing this, and he's like, "Well, I'm in," and like on the spot, like offered to write a check. Um, and so that was very eye opening, where I was like, "Oh shit, maybe I could raise money." And so started asking around, and like before I knew it, within a like 2-3 weeks, had $2.5 million put together to the point where I could hire, not hire, but like, you know, have co-founders, Max and Antonio
Mm-hmm.
from the Atom team. I could be like, hey, I've got a bunch of money. Do you want to do this with me? Um, and yeah, it just felt like somebody had pulled like a Ferrari into my driveway and handed me the keys, kind of. Like it was just such an amazing feeling to
Mm-hmm.
go from, again, kind of feeling pretty lost to being like sort of saved. Like this, yeah, I don't know. I've heard this phrase somewhere like leap and the net will appear. And that hasn't always been the case. Like sometimes I've leapt and just fallen on my face and then
Mm-hmm.
skidded across the concrete. But like here was one case where like, you know, the net appeared for us, or the path forward appeared. Um yeah, and so that's the start of Zed. It really is just like a passion project that I refuse to give up on, I guess.
That's
Yeah.
great. I mean, that's always the story of the best software out there. If you go out looking to make money, you might make something that's neat, you might make something that's good, but like the real good software out there is the passion project stuff that you have to make, or else your soul implodes, you know? And
Yeah.
it's really neat hearing that, you know, because I thought there was something special with Zed the first time I ran it. I mean, I found out about it at the same time a lot of people did when you open sourced it, which I have to ask about that in a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's fantastic software, and I don't have a second part to
Thank
that
you.
sentence. It's fantastic software.
Thank you. There's plenty of problems with it.
I wasn't going to
I'll
get
be
into
the
that.
first to say
Can't run it on
that.
Linux.
No, you can. You can. Actually, we don't have an official release on Linux yet, but there are a lot of people building it from source on Linux. And so hopefully soon, very soon, we'll have an official release. Um, but if you want to build it, you can build it.
Well, I'd like to
Um,
issue a complaint. It only runs on X11 mode. If you run it in Wayland, none of the buttons
okay.
work. Ah! I got a Mac. Don't worry. I got a
That's
Mac. We're good.
this is why I like resisted Linux for so long, because it just felt like such an endless like an endless source of variation.
This is my problem. I got a
Um,
cross-platform app too, and it's like all the people who want to run it are all Linux people, and they're like, "Oh, why doesn't it work on my thing?" And it's like, "No, please go away. I will go through the effort to make it work on Windows. I will go through the effort to make it work on Mac. And if you run XYZ GXB36C Linux on the 5.2.1.6 kernel, go fuck yourself. I don't care. I do not care. Figure it out. I'll support Ubuntu maybe. I don't.
yeah, I mean, I care. It's just like I care about a lot of things, and so well, I mean, luckily there are people on the team who are more passionate about Linux than I am. Um,
Certainly.
but and I want to support. I don't know. I want Zed to run everywhere and be all things to all people. But we just gotta like, do that in the right order, be the
Yeah.
right things to the right people in the right order
Mm.
to make it to make some, to grow, and then ultimately like, build a business out of this thing. And so, but anyway, it does run on Linux, and apparently you're aware of that. But yeah, it has some issues. Um, but yeah, I mean, at the core of Zed is like an extreme desire to have a beautiful, a beautiful code base, and um, ultimately like a beautiful product built on that. And every line of code is written by somebody that cares really hard. But even it turns out, even when you care really hard, it's really still hard to build a code editor that covers all the surface area.
I mean,
Yeah,
especially in the
it's still
modern
hard.
day where you have to compete with so many offerings out there and so much stuff, and people have such high expectations. Especially if you say
Yeah.
you write it in Rust. I was just having a discussion about this the other day. A lot of people out there, would you say it's written in Rust? They say, all right, it has to be the fastest thing I've ever seen. It can never crash on me. It's written in Rust, damn it.
Yeah, and I think we're pretty fast and also quite stable.
Yeah.
Like I haven't had a panic. I don't know. I can't remember the last time that panicked on me. Um, so, but they do happen. I mean, we track them and we're on top of them. I care very hard about the stability of Zed and, um, but still, writing native software where like the consequences of getting it wrong is not like, oh, a little
Mhm.
stack trace gets thrown in the corner or whatever and something doesn't quite work. It's like, nope, game over. End.
Yeah.
It's a whole other standard. Um, so yeah, I'm quite proud of where we're at, and also quite excited to make where we're at better. Put it
Yeah, no,
that
it's
way. Yeah.
fantastic. My inner Linux user was coming out for a second there, but I was very impressed, and I a lot of people were I've been shilling Zed since about 3 days after it was open sourced,
Thank you.
and a lot of people would ask like why was it Mac first? I always just explained it away as like, well, obviously they're a company trying to make money, and before they were open source, the only people who are willing to pay for high quality, fairly simple software were Mac users. So obviously you start with Mac. I'm curious what the real reason for starting with Mac was.
I'm a Mac user, and it was at the beginning,
That's funny.
just me and Antonio. It's as simple as that,
That's great. I
It's
was
just
thinking way
like,
too hard. I got to stop doing that.
yeah, and it's just like you got to start somewhere, so you may as well
Mhm.
start on the platform you're on. And maybe I should have been a Linux user, but
Oh no, it
I
wouldn't
don't
have been
know.
worth it.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. I like the Mac hardware, and like maybe I will not maybe I'm definitely privileged uh, to the degree that like I've always been able to obtain it. Um, I mean, in the early, I bought my first Mac. I think it was OS 10.2. My friend Will told me Mac was the place to be, and my impression of what it meant to be on a Mac was like the OS 9 days or whatever, right? Like
Yeah,
where everything just felt like so locked down and no fun at all. Um, but then when I discovered like, oh no, this new Mac OS is like OS X is what I would call it, which wasn't even right? OS 10 was what you're supposed to call it. But it being based on Unix and Linux scared me, to be honest. I mean, I was like a sophomore in college, I think, and
yeah,
like had a lot going on. But just this notion that like I had access to Linux, I didn't have to like SSH into the campus like Solaris box or whatever to use Emacs. I just had a Unix system right there,
yeah.
and yet it was like very approachable.
Mhm.
Like that's what got me on the Mac, and then like Pivotal was all Macs, and so I just never had a strong enough incentive to leave the platform, and it's not perfect. And but I don't know, the M3 is pretty freaking fabulous. Like
Yeah.
to have a this many cores and 128 gigs of unified memory, um, just like in a thing I can throw into my backpack is
It's
amazing.
great. I'm still rocking the M1, but the M1 was good enough that like I don't have any problems, so I can't upgrade with a clear head. You know what I mean? Like I have to go find a pile of money before I'm willing to upgrade, even though it's it's just it's too good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the main reason is just like Zed takes freaking ever to compile, and
Yeah.
yeah, so I just needed. I don't know. I actually did need it, and again, had we put in an extra 5 years of effort making sure we had no dependencies and compile in 13 seconds on a Raspberry Pi or whatever, I wouldn't have that problem, but like, I don't know, we do have quite a few dependencies and quite a bit of Rust code that we wrote ourselves to compile. So it actually makes sense to have a beefy machine for the moment.
That's funny. So, oh, I was going to say, it's funny because I can see you appreciating Mac as kind of the approachable but still Unix system. It really maybe I'm reading too deep into this, but it seems like that kind of philosophy is followed into Zed, where it's very sane defaults, totally approachable, but like fundamentally it's like a very it's for editing code, so it's like very nice on the outside and very nice to use, but you can get into whatever it is you need to do if you need to do it.
100%. Yeah, it's very much the philosophy behind it is like power,
Hmm.
uh, but packaged in an approachable way,
Hmm.
or yeah, kind of like the door handle popping out of the Model S or whatever
Yeah,
at the moment you walk up,
yeah,
of just like
absolutely.
keep it tucked away, but then reveal it as necessary.
Oh, you know what? I
Um,
just realized something.
yeah, you gotta go.
Can you tell everyone? No, no, no. I'm going to go for
Oh,
1 second. I'm going to come back. Can you tell everyone about the
okay,
hyperbaric chamber while I do that?
sure.
All right.
So I live at altitude. I'm divorced with children at altitude, and I find that I sleep much better at sea level. Um, but I do not have the option of being at sea level. So when I discovered a few months ago the existence of these things, it felt like yeah the I had to try it. So at first I like went to a place that had them, and it's just so relaxing to get in there. Like behind it, there's like a compressor to fill it with air, and it goes to 1.4 atmospheres, and then there's also an oxygen concentrator, and so you're breathing like 95% oxygen or whatever in 1.4 atmospheres, and so it's just like cramming oxygen into every tissue of your body. Because you know, like a soda can, when you open a soda can, like the bubbles come out, and the reason the bubbles aren't coming out when the soda can's closed is because the contents are under pressure. So when something's under pressure, you can like dissolve more gas into it. So it's a way of like, yeah, dissolving way more oxygen into your body than would be possible under any other circumstances. So it's like a nice antidote to some of my sleep challenges living at altitude. Um,
That makes sense.
yeah, so that's why I have it. So I've been trying to go in there every day
Hmm.
for like an hour, and I got the sitted version, so you can like sit in there and write code. Um, although sometimes it's just good to just relax and breathe and like, yeah, feel better. Thanks for putting that sweatshirt on. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I just realized I've been sitting here for the last like hour
Here,
not wearing my Zed sweatshirt.
here, let me take my sweatshirt off because I got a stud shirt on and I'm actually getting hot. All right,
Hell yeah.
now we can proceed, right? I actually,
Yeah. Oh man,
um,
we were forgetting about wearing the Zed merch the entire time.
that's
That's
funny.
great. So
Uh,
you really did a good job. You touched on like nearly everything I was going to ask about. I just wanted to get a little bit more into the business side of things before we went off.
yeah.
First off, what was it like? Let's see, you kind of out of just your passion for writing Zed, you ended up becoming a business owner. How have you adjusted to that?
Um, pretty well, honestly. Like, I don't know. There's been, yeah, we've let a couple people go. That's been
Oh,
miserable. That was miserable.
oh yeah, that's the
Not a
worst
fun
thing.
part of being, yeah, a business owner. Um, but overall, like, I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying like having the authority to just make sure that things are done right by my definition of right. Um, and but yeah, I mean, to be honest, we have $0 in revenue right now, so we have a long way to go. right? We're
Certainly.
very much like, and and that's by design because I think any revenue that we're gonna generate has to be on the basis of a shit ton of people using Zed.
Hmm.
Um, and so we're very deliberately focusing on growth, getting as many people using Zed as possible, and building this, yeah, this foundation on which a business can be built. Um, but when I went out to raise money, my friend like offered me that initial investment, but as the wheels started turning, and even before, like when I quit, my plan was to like work on Zed until I could pitch it and get investment. So I already had
Hmm.
a business model in mind, and for me, my business model, um, I'm open to other things. Like I'm not, you know, uh, married to only this being the only ways that makes money, but it's always been helping people collaborate with each other.
Hmm.
Um, and it's hard because like it's kind of like selling somebody the first phone.
Yeah.
Like you can't um, sell people on collaboration until like a lot of people are
Hmm.
using Zed. Uh, and so that's like the challenging part is, yeah, you your friends and your colleagues and your teammates like need to be using Zed in order for you to even think about collaborating with them in it. In order for them to be using Zed, it needs to
Hmm.
support your language and ESLint or whatever other random corner of the development ecosystem. So there's just like, yeah, that's been the sequencing. Like
Hmm.
we built collaboration into the core of Zed because I knew that if we didn't do that, it would be a bolt-on, and that wouldn't work. We already tried that with Adam. I knew
Hmm.
collaboration needed to be part of the plan and part of the design from day one. But from a sequencing perspective, we're still sort of focused on the single player use case right now of just getting a ton of people using it. But once a ton of people are using it, and we're getting there, but we have a long ways to go. I'm just so excited about what's going to be possible when, like, to collaborate with somebody, you're not command tabbing out to your web browser to look at a diff of a snapshot
Yeah.
that they use in a tool designed to help people collaborate on a mailing list. Like actually integrating collaboration as a first class concern into the authoring environment is going to be next level, and we've just scratched the surface of what that looks like.
I was
Yeah,
thoroughly impressed. I did a stream where I had I think 7 or 8 different people on, and we were all in the same. We were making the same stupid web app and the same thing using Zed, like a couple weeks after it went open source, and I was so thoroughly impressed by how quickly everything worked and how easy it was to get everything. And we had, one person was working up here in the file and one person was working down here. We were all in the same file. And it was just like, it was this pandemonium thing. I think any viewer wants to see that. It's in my archives. I think I called it 10 devs, one editor or something. And I
I
was
remember
so
when you
impressed
did
by it.
that. I was super stoked. I think I watched part of it live. I didn't. There
Fantastic.
was something going on. I think I had my kids or something, but I dropped in just
Mhm.
briefly. I remember I said something to you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah, um, yeah. And so to me, that's just like scratching the surface of what is possible because that's like the synchronous
Uh-huh.
workflow, and we built that because like we honestly just needed that,
Yeah.
and it's like fundamental to how we operate as a company. Like we have a
Mhm.
very low management, low control. It's very like early GitHub vibes of just like hiring people you trust and then trusting those people, um, and not being super
Uh-huh.
prescriptive and controlling. It's like setting some broad objectives and then attacking it together.
Mhm.
But I think the only way that works is that we're able to like get in a working copy together and jam on making it happen.
Mhm.
And the kind of exchanges that occur as you're doing that, or like when we were in Italy doing the GPUI rewrite, and there's like 6 people in one working copy just like burning down Rust compilers, like crawling all over the place. Like it creates like a level of sort of shared consciousness to really work
Yeah.
together that way directly. That's not possible any other way. And so like that's the main reason why that's all other than like wanting it to be in the DNA of the product, um, and then just us needing it ourselves. But I also think there's like just UX
Hmm.
challenges that like don't make it super obvious like how to get into that mode. And there's also just so much more to do around async. Like, yeah, we started
Hmm.
last summer and I want to get back into it, but think other things sort of took precedent building this CRDB. It's like a database for the same kind of things we're doing kind of at the scale of individual buffers and RAM, broadening that out to be the scale of the entire repo and persisted to disk and replicated
Hmm.
so that we could really start getting into a world where you can like be driving past a piece of code and be like, oh, I want to bring something up about that and just highlight it and like leave an annotation, like leave a comment. Because right now, like the kinds of conversations you can sort of
Hmm.
have around code are limited to these like snapshots that we take with Git.
Yeah.
And I think because you can only kind of tie your conversation to a snapshot, snapshots end up not being useful once they get too stale.
Yeah.
And so we end up only having conversations about the code we're changing because those are the only snapshots we can get that aren't stale. But there's all kinds of conversations we should probably be having about a code base, about code that was written like 2 years ago, either like someone asking a question or like suggesting something. Anyway, so envisioning like the entire code base is this like canvas for a conversation. Um, yeah, I'm like chomping at the bit to get there, and at the same time, I know that like we probably need to support like running, like this thing we've been working on, running a test. When you're, popping a little test runner thing up next to tests, and
Yeah.
like just all the things that aren't about collaboration at all, that are just about a good single player experience. Sorry, I'm really going long. Let me stop and let you get a word in
Yeah. No worries.
edgewise. I get excited.
The only other
Yeah.
stuff I wanted to know was one, uh, well, it's why did you open source it? Was that just to get more users, or
I mean, I just first of all, it's just more fun.
it's absolutely more
So
fun with
again,
open source? Yeah.
yeah, like and I just felt like it's kind of required for I don't know. My hypothesis is that people don't really get that excited about a closed source editor. Um, and it feels like we don't need the editor to be closed source to make money. Like the business, I don't want to be in the business of like selling somebody like software that they run on their computer that's like closed source and license. It's just like such a pain in the neck to like, what do? You give them a trial and then you pop up something in their face. Like, I don't want to be in the business of like being in that kind of adversarial relationship
That makes
with
sense.
the Zed user. And so the plan has always been like the real opportunity is in connecting the users of Zed
I
to
see.
one another in valuable ways. And that's like a network service that we can run where if you don't pay, we just like don't answer your WebSocket connection, right? You
That
know what I
makes
mean?
sense.
Like it's
Yeah.
a much simpler like
Hmm.
monetization path. Now to be fair, like we've actually open sourced our server component. And so but that's a little like I think down the road as we start more heavily investing in like team focused commercial stuff,
Hmm.
I could see potentially holding some of that back just to preserve the ability to monetize it. Um, but right now it just felt like annoying as part of the development workflow to like keep the server stuff
Hmm.
closed. So we decided to open that as well. So yeah, it's more fun. I want contributions, and I
Yeah.
think we've gotten a lot of them. I want people to see what we've created and be able to talk about what we've created, like and share it with the world. Um, which just doesn't
Hmm.
make sense closed source. Like it was just hard to talk about what we were doing when we were closed because
Yeah.
I would just feel like, what am I doing? I'm sitting here talking about this data structure or this algorithm, and nobody can even really see it. I'm showing them like a snippet of it through this window.
Yeah.
Um,
Just like, oh
I
yeah,
didn't
A
like
squared,
that.
we got that. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, so it's just like a really natural fit, I think, for a code editor to
Mhm.
to have it be open. And I still think like, yeah, ultimately Git is open source, right? It's under the same
Yeah.
license that Zed is under, the GPL. Um, And so I really think that like you have to squint right now to see it, but we're kind of building like the Git part of this play, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like Zed, the client, should be open source. I think we can offer value on the server that might not always be open source down the line. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
No, absolutely answers the question. So before we go, I'm just going to go through the chat has been going
Oh,
crazy.
right.
So I just want to address a couple of things from the chat. Let's see. Okay, so it's people talking mad shit about me, which is pretty standard for the chat. Uh, oh no, a lot of people saying a bunch of stupid stuff, also standard for the chat.
Let me check it out. Is it going to hurt my feelings? I got a
No, no,
pretty
it,
thick
it
skin
only
at
hurts
this
my
point.
feelings. And then let's see, calling Linux for neckbeards, fair enough. Arch Linux is for mega nerds. They were saying that because I run Arch Linux.
Witch Rebecca. Hi, Witch Rebecca.
They can't spell hyperbaric chamber.
Yeah, I was telling my barber about it, which he was like, "Oh, it makes me think of hyperbolic time chamber from Dragon Ball Z," but I never saw Dragon Ball Z, so I didn't. But yeah,
A lot of
anyway.
commentary on the outfits. Oh, you guys are matching, super cute. Nate, why are you so adorable? Colt or couple, let the chat decide. When do we
It's
all get the
funny.
Kool-Aid? Oh, which Rebecca says, should I use Zed today?
I mean, I think you should, and then let us know how it goes. Um, but I've been using Zed every day for I don't know how long now, over 2 years, I think. Um,
All right.
and I'm a happy man.
Rebecca also says you should do a brand partnership with the electronic music artist Zed.
Hmm.
Some do that. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like we need to get bigger before that would make sense, but I'm down.
What else? A bunch of nonsense. Nobody knows how to do math. And yeah, there we are. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Normally, now I'd say, is there anything you want to tell the viewers? But I'm going to guess it's run Zed.
Yeah, run Zed if you're on Linux, build Zed, but not on only on X11, right?
As far as I can tell, I don't know. Maybe I'm dumb. I was told I was dumb for not being able to run it on Wayland in the chat.
Or just like help us, yeah, help us, refine it on that platform. Um, and yeah, please, please give it a try and try collaborating too, because I think it's a game-changing way to work that uh, is people don't understand yet.
Hmm.
So be part of that wave of
Absolutely.
understanding the power of that. Yeah,
Also,
cool.
talking about Vim, I personally use Vim most of the time. Love Vim. So the chat seems to also want to talk about Vim. I don't know. Do you have any opinions on
Yeah,
Vim?
I mean, I used Vim to build Atom, so I got like pretty good at it. But then once we built Atom, it was a while until our Vim bindings came along, and so I went back to the Emacs bindings that I've are
Oh
gradually
no, the dark
destroying my
side.
pinky finger. Yeah, it's like my pinky finger and thumb. I've like remapped. I have two keyboards and I've remapped spacebar to command. I've like shifted all the modifier keys over to not. Uh, I know that the modal binding approach is a more long term, like sustainable and superior way to work. But I'm just never willing to sort of like spend my day on the slopes, snowboarding instead of skiing. If you get my metaphor, it's just like I just want to code it the way that I'm fast right now. I don't want to retrain my muscle memory. Um, so that's me. But we have some Vim users like Torsten, big Neo Vim guy, Conrad, big Vim user, um, on the team who have lovingly crafted our integrated Vim bindings. There's still features that are missing. Like we don't have registers, we don't have marks, but we have like pretty comprehensive movement and text objects, and I don't know, pretty legit Vim binding support integrated into the core. It's not an add-on. Something I take super seriously, and like in the fullness of time, I very much want all the good stuff from Vim to be a part of Zed. So
I mean, if you wanted all the
I
good
hear
stuff from
you.
Vim to be a part of Zed, you'd just make Zed be Vim. I mean,
Yeah,
easy.
but I don't want to be only in the terminal. I do want to control the core data structures. So yeah, that's why we're not just like yeah, we just like pop up Zed's terminal, integrated terminal, and run Vim. Done.
Ooh,
You know.
ooh, that sounds like a
Uh,
good idea. I think I might be using
yeah,
Zed a lot more.
it's funny. Yeah. But I do think like it's finite, like the list of things.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. We're never gonna run like a Vim script interpreter or something like that. That would be going too far.
Nobody wants that.
But but I think like the kind of hopefully eventually we'll kind of cover everybody's muscle memory. It's just a huge, yeah. It's a Venn diagram from hell of like all the surface area of Vim and what everybody needs. But we're chipping away at it gradually, and give it a try. You may be pleasantly surprised that it's pretty good for you.
That's funny. All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show. It's been great. Um,
Agreed. Yeah. Thanks for listening to maybe TMI from me.
oh
Uh,
no, don't worry about it.
yeah.
That's what the show is about. This is the thing.
Good.
I bring on people, and they're always told to talk about their projects, and they're always told to talk about whatever the hot new thing that just happened is. And it's like, well, what turns the people who make these things? How do these interesting people who are doing all this other stuff? How do they become interesting? What kind of upbringing? What kind of stuff leads to that? Where'd you come from? Where did you come from?
Yeah.
Where did you go? Where did you come from? Anyway.
Yeah. And I tried to be honest about the less pretty and the less glamorous parts of the journey
Mhm.
too. So hopefully that's helpful to people that are, yeah, just keep going. Keep pursuing your dream. That's what I'll
Yeah,
say.
it's so important to see. A lot of people think that like, oh well, I can't write a 1,000-line C++ program that compiles on the first time. I'm clearly a failure and I'm never going to be good at programming. It's like, brother, I was literally crying 3 days ago trying to write CSS. This is what happens,
Totally. Totally. Don't give up. Just keep going. But also have a plan for how you're gonna put food on the table. Pro tip for my younger self. But anyway.
Absolutely. All right,
All
well,
right. Well, thank you so much.
thank you. It's been a pleasure. And for the viewers, I will see you tomorrow where I will likely be writing code or something.